former Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson, and Peggy Noonan, columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Thanks to all of you for being here. David, I want to start with you. We obviously just talked to both of our guests about the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey, the fact that President Trump has said there will be others. Two very different responses from Leader Thune and Leader Schumer. Where do you see this going next?
I think we should take the president at his word. It used to be in 2016 and Trump 1.0, I guess, that it was considered the height of wisdom that the press takes Trump literally and the people take him seriously, and then vice versa. I think it's possible to do both at the same time. The president is telling us that he has an enemies list that he's going to act on. He's told us who's on the enemies list. John Bolton, Letitia James, Fannie Willis ought to be on her guard, and many, many more, whether they're in the press or civic society. I think this is a real emergency, and it should be taken seriously, and know that he's going to act on it. It's not just blather out on the White House lawn. That's the difference between the first term and the second term. First term was filled with impulses, and the second term is efficient, ruthless, and it's happening every day. This movement toward authoritarianism is very distinct and needs to be taken seriously. This is not just a normal, we talked about a budget battle and all that. That's normal politics. This is something extraordinary.
Secretary Johnson, pick up on that point. David is calling this extraordinary, a movement toward authoritarianism. You've seen the details that have been released so far of the case against former FBI Director James Comey, someone who you know, who you've worked with. Is there a case here? Is this going to go to trial? And do you see this as an inflection point as well?
Jim Comey and I are friends. We were federal prosecutors together 35, 36 years ago, assistant U.S. attorneys here in Manhattan, hired by Rudy Giuliani. Jim has hired as his defense attorney Pat Fitzgerald, who was also an assistant U.S. attorney here in Manhattan 35, 36 years ago. He went on to be U.S. attorney in Chicago. Pat is a hard-charging lawyer. There are lots of, from the prosecution standpoint, there are lots of trouble signs here. Jim, I'm sure, is anxious to go to trial, anxious to tell his story, and he will tell it well. Before it even gets to trial, I suspect there will be a motion to dismiss for selective prosecution, for vindictive prosecution. Those are rarely granted, but this will be a very compelling case based on the president's own statements about how his Department of Justice should go after Jim Comey. There are already trouble signs. First of all, the very seasoned U.S. attorney in that district overseeing this case resigned, and the grand jury. You know, we like to say that if a prosecutor asks, a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. In this case, the grand jury hearing this case actually rejected one of the three charges on a very low standard, simply probable cause. The majority of the grand jurors have to vote that. That was rejected, which is highly, highly unusual. And so this case is flawed from the get-go, frankly.
Peggy, talk big picture, because President Trump campaigned on a promise of retribution, but he said, including in an interview with me, my success will be my retribution. Is this what Republican voters wanted, and is this what they voted for?
Well, it's in terms of public reaction, I think when the first pictures of Jim Comey and the president started coming on the television and the websites a few days ago, when there's new action and Comey indicted, I suspect a heck of a lot of people just looked and thought, oh no, not that again. There seems no real public purpose here, no real benefit to the public. This seems to be a case of revenge on one's enemies. Donald Trump feels that justice was made into lawfare and weaponization against him in the 4 years, well, in the 4 years of his presidency, but also afterwards. He now wants to do the same, turn the same guns on the people who he feels tormented them. He wants them to feel it financially and emotionally. It makes Donald Trump look smaller. It makes the U.S. government look smaller. We should not be operating like this as a Justice Department with a president putting his thumb on the scales in this way, in this personal way that speaks of revenge and only revenge. I think it is a dreadful mistake, but I think it is very Donald Trump to do it. There will be more, and the second administration is different from the first administration, and that in the first administration, they did care about public reaction to overstepping. They don't care now.
Well, and the other big difference is congressional oversight. This is part of what I asked Leader Schumer about. What, if anything, he was clearly opposed to sending troops into Portland. What, if anything, can be done about it? He signaled that he is looking into what Congress can do, but do you anticipate that Congress can or will do anything in terms of oversight
I think
here, David?
up until now, Congress has not proved itself to be a bulwark against this authoritarian drift. I think that's very clear. I mean, I think Senator Schumer acts in earnest, but it hasn't been effective overall in stanching this terrible bleeding. Look, we have an emergency here. I don't want to, constantly be the guy that's acting as if his hair is on fire, but we have a moral emergency when a president of the United States goes to a memorial service and rebukes the widow's call for mercy and forgiveness, an extraordinary gesture, no matter what you think of Charlie Kirk and Erica Kirk's politics, and I have all kinds of problems with that, but that was an amazing gesture. And then the President of the United States says, no, I hate my opponents. That's a moral crisis. You have a crisis of competence when the next day he goes to a press conference and starts ranting and raving about Tylenol, making parents of autistic kids panic and are confused. And you have a political crisis in 16 different directions. And all of this is not been met. Nobody's met the test in Congress fully.
All right, well, we will pause this part of our conversation, but please stick around. We have a lot more to get to with